Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we take a single body of work, a text, a piece of research, and we really excavate it so you can be thoroughly informed and fast.
And today we are launching into a really extended analysis of what a lot of scholars see as one of King David's most spiritually disciplined and just brutally honest personal prayers. We're talking about Psalm 141.
We are, and the detailed teaching material guiding us today, it's titled A Divine Sentry, David's Plea for Protection and Purity. It was compiled by the UNFIJ team.
And that title, I mean, it really captures the essence perfectly.
It does, because we're not just looking at ancient history here. We're really treating this psalm as a tactical blueprint for spiritual resilience when life hits peak pressure. Our mission is to pull out the deepest, most important nuggets of knowledge.
About urgent prayer, about spiritual discipline.
And about that defiant, intentional faith. We're getting it all directly from this source material.
You know, the structure of Psalm 141 is what I find so psychologically fascinating. David starts out exactly where you think he would, right? He's crying out for urgent external deliverance.
He's in real trouble. He has enemies who want him dead.
Exactly. But the source material, the one provided by the You Need Faith in Jesus team, it rightly highlights the core conflict. David shifts almost immediately from those external threats to this profound internal purity.
That's the pivot.
That is the pivot. He recognizes that his greatest vulnerability isn't, the spear coming from outside his tent. It's the wickedness that might escape his own lips, or even worse, corrupt his own heart. He gets that being saved from the enemy is, it's useless if he's corrupted by the enemy's ways at the same time.
So David recognizes the greatest danger to a believer isn't death, it's compromise. Okay, let's unpack this journey. Let's start with that raw primal opening so we jump right into the depths of his distress in verse 1. David doesn't ease into it, he just shouts. Let's read the King James Version here. Lord, I cry unto thee. Make haste unto me. Give ear unto my voice when I cry unto thee. That's Psalm 141, verse 1.
Make haste unto me. I mean, that is a raw, demanding phrase.
It is. It's the language of a man in serious, serious trouble who needs attention right now. The source analysis really emphasizes that this language is urgent. It's stripped of all that formal, elaborate poetry.
Well, he's basically demanding in a reverent way, but still demanding, that the creator of the universe act quickly.
And that urgency is key, isn't it? It shows how intimate his relationship with God really is.
Absolutely. He feels he has the right to approach God, not as some fearful servant, but almost like a beloved son, demanding his father intervene immediately. And the You Need Faith in Jesus team emphasizes this isn't some academic request, it's a visceral plea. It's rooted in this deep, existing, trusted bond.
I find myself wondering about the psychology of that, though. Why does he feel he can demand speed? Is it because he thinks his cause is just righteous, or is it just the panic of the moment?
I think it's both. But it's primarily this deep-seated theological belief that God is actively involved in the timing of his life. For David, prayer isn't just venting, it's engaging the sovereign will of God. When David says, make haste, he's actually invoking God's character as a deliverer. And this isn't a one-off thing. The teaching material reminds us he repeats this expectation in other prayers.
We see that specifically in Psalm 70, chapter 1.
Precisely. In Psalm 70, verse 1, it reads, make haste, O God, to deliver me. Make haste to help me, O Lord.
The exact same phrase.
The exact same phrase, make haste. The fact that it shows up again and again across the Psalms, it just confirms that asking for rapid, quick help is it's a common and valid request from God's people. It reassures you as a believer that seeking speedy relief is a totally appropriate response when you're facing overwhelming circumstances.
You're encouraged to bring your urgent, time-sensitive needs to God without, censoring the panic or the desperation. So the practical application for you, the listener, if you're feeling overwhelmed right now, is to just skip the preambles.
Absolutely. The source analysis gives a very direct practical step here. The modern believer does not need a perfectly ordered life or some elaborate prayer routine to approach God.
That's a huge misconception, isn't it? That you have to clean up your internal house before you can knock on God's door.
It is, and David's example just refutes it directly. In those moments of genuine crisis or desperation, the simple, honest shout for help, just trusting that he hears and cares about your immediate, raw need, that is often the most effective prayer. It's all about relationship, not religious ritual.
That's a wonderful insight, the power of just a raw, simple shout for help. But then David, having set that foundation of urgency, he immediately pivots in verse 2 to something profoundly sophisticated in his worship.
He really does.
This is where he elevates his private prayer to the level of official, sacred tabernacle service. Let's look at the full verse. It says, "Let my prayer be set forth before thee as incense, and the lifting up of my hands as the evening sacrifice." Psalm 141, verse 2.
This verse is just a masterpiece of spiritual substitution. David is using two incredibly profound pieces of tabernacle imagery to make his desperate private cry acceptable to God.
The first image, prayer as incense, is just so rich. He wants his words to be like that fragrant smoke constantly burning on the golden altar.
And we have to understand the historical weight of that temple incense. It wasn't just, pleasant smoke.
Right.
The ritual was highly specific. It required immense reverence. The mixture itself was made of 4 distinct sacred spices, and it was strictly forbidden to use that exact composition for any common purpose.
So for David to want his prayer to be set forth as this particular, precious, perpetually burning incense,
it means he desires his words to be treated as sacred, as constant, as a sweet-smelling aroma to God. He's saying he wants his private conversation to carry the exact same weight as the holiest public ritual.
and the second image, lifting hands as a sacrifice, that ties directly into the daily religious rhythm of Israel. He wants the physical posture of his prayer, the lifting of his hands, to be accepted like the official daily evening sacrifice.
Yes, and the evening sacrifice was deeply significant. It wasn't just any sacrifice. It was usually offered around 3:00 p.m., and it was one of the 2 daily continual burnt offerings. It specifically involved a lamb, symbolizing atonement and consecration for the whole community.
But David, who was likely on the run from Saul or some other power, was cut off from Jerusalem. He couldn't get to the tabernacle.
He couldn't offer the lamb. He couldn't participate in the ritual.
So this prayer is his ultimate spiritual substitution. He's asking God, who sees the heart, to accept his personal worship, his words, his gesture, as a valid, holy spiritual offering in place of the official, costly physical act.
It's a radical statement on the accessibility of worship. It's declaring that sincere, heartfelt, private devotion holds the same weight in God's eyes as the public, institutional service, as long as the heart is right. And we know from the New Testament that this spiritual substitution is real.
So where does the source connect this in the New Testament?
The teaching material points us beautifully to the book of Revelation, chapter 8, verse 4. It says, "And the smoke of the incense which came with the prayers of the saints ascended up before God out of the angel's hand."
So that confirms it.
It confirms David's prayer request completely. God truly does receive the prayers of his people, the saints, as a pleasing, fragrant offering. It validates that spiritual substitution across the ages. Our words, when offered in faith, literally rise before the throne of God like precious holy smoke.
Okay, so if we take that teaching seriously, what is the application for us, for you listening, in a world where physical altars and temples have been replaced by a spiritual reality?
The lesson is that our private worship is holy. Our silent prayers, our physical posture of praise, our genuine attempts at devotion, all of it is seen by God as a holy, acceptable sacrifice. The emphasis from the You Need Faith in Jesus team is that this offering has to be sincere. And for us, it's made acceptable because it's offered through the completed work of Jesus Christ. We don't need a golden altar. Our heart is the altar, and our dedication is the incense and the sacrifice.
We've discussed the power of that urgent cry and the validity of private worship. But now, David makes that profound philosophical pivot we mentioned earlier. He literally interrupts the prayer for external deliverance to focus entirely inward, starting with the tongue in verse 3.
It's an amazing shift.
Listen to this request. "Set a watch, O Lord, before my mouth, kept the door of my lips." That's Psalm 141, verse 3.
I think the stakes here are just absolutely massive. David is facing physical ambush, a very real threat, yet he pauses his military plea to address the spiritual danger of his own speech.
He gets that if he were captured or compromised or fell into sin, the words escaping his mouth would likely be more damaging to his reputation and his relationship with God than any enemy spear.
Exactly. And he's not praying, "Help me try harder to control my speech." He's praying for divine external assistance to control an internal threat. He asks God to act as a sentry, a guard posted at the door of his lips.
It's about submitting his speech to God's direct control.
That's it. The use of the word door suggests that the mouth is a gateway, and dangerous things can pass through it, both coming in and going out. David is humbly admitting that he lacks the human willpower to tame his own tongue permanently. He needs a divine security detail, a divine sentry, as the source material calls it, to stop the wicked words, the careless gossip, or the angry accusations from escaping.
But why is the tongue so uniquely untamable? What does the wider scriptural context suggest about this specific internal battle?
David's insight here really prefigures the New Testament assessment perfectly. The material references James chapter 3, verse 8, which gives us the theological reason why David needs God's watchmen. Right, it says, "But the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison.
No man can tame.
If no man can tame it, then relying on self-will is pointless." David's prayer is the only true solution, asking for the supernatural intervention of God. And in our modern context, the tongue is amplified exponentially through technology. A careless word can now travel globally and be archived forever.
That raises a really practical challenge. We talk about the sentry over the mouth, but what about the digital mouth? How does the You Need Faith in Jesus team suggest applying this concept to modern communication, where speech is often written and instantaneous?
It means we have to ask the Holy Spirit for restraint and wisdom in all forms of communication that come from us. This includes conversations, yes, but also our social media posts, our heated texts, our quickly drafted emails, especially our words in moments of anger or frustration. That divine sentry needs to be on duty 24/7, filtering not just what is said aloud, but what is typed and transmitted, ensuring our digital words honor God rather than causing destruction.
Which is often much harder to take back than a spoken word.
Much harder. It's a proactive, comprehensive, spiritual defense mechanism against the digital poison the tongue can spread.
So having secured the mouth, David immediately deepens the internal defense system. He moves from the expression of sin to the source of sin, the heart, in verse 4. This is a prayer against internal corruption itself.
This is where it gets really deep.
Here is the KJV text. Incline not my heart to any evil thing, to practice wicked works with men that work iniquity. And let me not eat of their dainties. That's Psalm 141, verse 4.
The focus moves from guarding actions to guarding affections. David is praying against his heart inclining or actively leaning toward and desiring wickedness. Sin always starts with that internal tilt, a desire that God isn't satisfying. He's asking God to actively direct his deepest desires away from evil.
But he gets specific. He prays against two things: practicing wicked works with wicked men and refusing to eat of their dainties.
Yes, and the source analysis shows a dual prayer here. It's a prayer against association and a prayer against appetite. First, he doesn't want to join in the activity of wicked people because association so often leads to imitation. Second, he hits that powerful, highly specific image. Let me not eat of their dainties.
So what makes the dainties so dangerous? Why single out the food?
The dainties represent the temporary pleasures, the luxurious comforts, the easy satisfaction, and the appealing fellowship that comes from compromising your principles with the world. Think of it this way. The wicked sometimes live easier, more luxurious lives in the short term, precisely because they compromise their integrity. David is praying against developing an appetite for that compromised comfort. He's refusing the satisfaction, the enjoyment, or the temporary acceptance that ungodly people celebrate. He is saying, I refuse to find my joy in what they find their joy in.
But here is where I want to challenge the application a little. Because in modern professional life, the dainties are often subtle. They might be essential networking events or necessary career compromises that slightly bend ethical lines. Where does the source material draw the practical boundary between necessary interaction and sinful compromise?
That is a vital question. The source material emphasizes that the boundary is drawn not in the interaction itself, but in the inclination of the heart and the satisfaction you get from it. David isn't praying, keep me away from all wicked people.
No.
He's praying, incline not my heart to their evil thing. If you have to interact professionally, that's necessity. But if you begin to enjoy, seek out, or find satisfaction in the iniquity that goes along with those interactions, if you start celebrating the compromise, that is when you've begun to eat of the dainties.
So it's about the heart's posture.
Exactly. The counsel here is clear. Proverbs 4, verse 14, which is referenced in the analysis, states, enter not into the path of the wicked, and go not in the way of evil men. The path itself, the way they live, is what we have to avoid internalizing. The dainties are the internal lure that keeps us walking on their path.
So, the action item regarding the heart is profound vigilance.
Precisely. We have to pray for God to actively shape our affections so that our true, lasting joy and satisfaction are found only in Him. We have to avoid chasing the fleeting, comfortable, and corrupting dainties the world serves up, which always, at the end of the day, come with the cost of spiritual compromise and a polluted heart.
David has demonstrated extraordinary maturity by accepting that his internal life is the greatest threat. But he takes that maturity a step further now, transitioning into the radical humility of embracing pain, specifically the pain of correction in verse 5. This is one of the most countercultural statements in the whole psalm.
It really is.
He writes, "Let the righteous smite me, it shall be a kindness, and let him reprove me. It shall be an excellent oil, which shall not break my head. For yet my prayer also shall be in their calamities." That's Psalm 141, verse 5.
This is a declaration that truth is better than comfort, even if the truth hurts. David is saying he would rather have the harsh, truth-telling correction, the smite, from a righteous person than the self-serving, smooth flattery of the wicked. In a world obsessed with protecting our dignity, David redefines rebuke as a genuine act of love.
Let's break down those metaphors. The correction is a kindness. Okay, that makes sense if it saves you from sin. But then he calls it a healing, excellent oil. Why oil?
We have to remember the historical and spiritual function of oil. Oil was used for anointing, for healing wounds, for soothing muscle pain. David sees correction not as a fresh injury, but as a healing remedy applied to an existing spiritual problem. And the source material highlights the critical detail: "This oil shall not break my head." In ancient cultures, humiliation was often symbolized by ashes on the head or a crushing blow. David emphasizes that godly correction is designed to restore and soothe, not to crush the spirit or destroy one's reputation. It is constructive pain. It aims to heal the spiritual wound that caused the behavior in the first place.
It requires deep security in God to view correction from a friend as healing oil. It's so easy to mistake a faithful wound for a declaration of war.
That is the core conflict. The teaching material uses the classic wisdom of Proverbs 27, verse 6 to illustrate this principle. It shows the contrast. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful.
An enemy's flattery, their dainties, will lead you to destruction while making you feel great.
Right. And a friend's painful truth, the smite, will lead you to restoration while making you feel terrible for a moment.
But this verse establishes a powerful two-way dynamic, doesn't it? A covenant of correction. David's willingness to accept the correction is matched by his promise at the end of the verse. "For yet my prayer also shall be in their calamities."
Yes, and this is crucial for defining godly relationships. David promises that in return for this courageous kindness, this willingness to speak a painful truth and risk the friendship, he will commit to praying fervently for those righteous friends when they face their own troubles.
So it's mutual.
It shows that true, godly friendship involves both demanding accountability and providing unwavering support. You have to earn the right to rebuke, and you pay back that spiritual debt through prayer and mutual support.
So if the practical application is cultivating a teachable heart, how does a listener discern correction that is truly excellent oil from correction that is just plain old criticism?
The core difference, as implied by the source, lies in the source and the intent. Is the correction coming from a righteous person, someone who models the faith and loves God? And second, does the message aim to restore you to holiness, or does it just aim to vent frustration or tear you down? We have to pray for a heart soft enough to receive truth, but discerning enough to test the fruit of the Spirit in the person delivering it.
So we need to actively seek out and value friends who love us enough to tell us the truth.
Exactly. Viewing correction as part of God's sovereign way of guarding us from sin.
Okay, David has put his internal house in order, he's accepted correction, and now his gaze shifts again. He's looking forward to the future vindication that makes all this painful process worthwhile in verse 6.
A really interesting verse.
Let's read this complex verse. It says, "When their judges are overthrown in stony places, they shall hear my words, for they are sweet." Psalm 141, verse 6.
This is a prediction of cosmic reversal and ultimate justice. David is looking forward to the day when the wicked leaders, the judges who currently mock or reject his godly wisdom, will face God's inevitable judgment. And the image of being overthrown in stony places suggests a violent, harsh, complete downfall. It's a metaphor for ruin in a desolate place where there is no comfort or aid.
We have to wonder who these judges were in David's time. They weren't necessarily formal judges, were they?
No, they represent the powerful, influential, wicked authorities of the day. Maybe Saul's corrupt officials, foreign rulers, or just influential people who sat in judgment over David's actions, calling his godly path foolish. David anticipates that these people who currently have all the earthly power will eventually be utterly ruined and exposed.
And then the incredible shift in the second part. They shall hear my words, for they are sweet. Why would David's words, which they clearly rejected before, suddenly become pleasant or sweet?
Because only when their own power fails, when their dainties have run out and they are ruined, will they finally be ready to listen. David's words, the warnings of compromise, the promise of God's justice, the wisdom of holiness, will then seem sweet and pleasant and desirable because they will recognize the complete folly and disaster of their own life choices.
They hit rock bottom and remember the advice they mocked.
Exactly. It is the ultimate prophetic patience. You maintain your integrity, you speak the truth, and you wait for the circumstances of life to confirm your words. That perfectly mirrors the story of the prodigal son.
That's what I was thinking.
The source analysis draws that parallel explicitly. The prodigal son only realized the sweet comfort of his father's house when he was feeding pigs and starving. And this principle of delayed vindication is confirmed in the New Testament as well. Luke 16, verse 23, the rich man, after a lifetime of earthly pleasure, finally desires the truth he had ignored once he is in torment.
So the application here is for the believer who feels their faithfulness and their truth-telling are just pointless because they are constantly rejected.
The instruction is simple but difficult. You have to remain absolutely faithful in speaking God's truth, even when it is rejected, ridiculed, or ignored. We have to trust in the long game of divine timing. The wisdom here is that a personal crisis, a calamity, or a complete failure in a person's life can dramatically soften their heart. And when that happens, they may finally, desperately remember and return to the sweet words of truth you faithfully shared long ago.
So your job isn't to convince them immediately.
No. Your job is to speak the truth consistently so that it is available when their time of crisis arrives. Don't stop planting those seeds.
David has looked forward to vindication, he's accepted the pain of correction, but now his focus snaps back to his horrifying present reality in verse 7. This verse is the emotional low point of the psalm. It conveys utter defeat.
It's incredibly graphic.
He paints this image. Our bones are scattered at the grave's mouth, as when one cutteth and cleaveth wood upon the earth. That's Psalm 141, verse 7.
This image just screams present desperation and utter helplessness. David is using this grim picture to describe how defeated, scattered, and exposed he and his followers feel. In David's era, the greatest dishonor wasn't death itself, but being left unburied. This image bones already scattered like kindling, waiting at the very edge of the grave. It signifies complete vulnerability, dishonor, and the loss of all human hope.
The violence of the comparison cleaving wood with an axe suggests a brutal, comprehensive destruction. They don't just feel like they're facing defeat, they feel like the defeated remnants scattered like chips from a log, completely powerless and forgotten.
It communicates a state of post-defeat hopelessness. And the source material highlights that this raw honesty is actually a profound comfort for you, the listener. David models being completely truthful with God about the depth of your despair. If you feel your own situation is hopeless, broken, fragmented, and beyond human repair like scattered bones, David has walked that path, and he's articulated that feeling to God. He wasn't afraid to use visceral, grim language.
And the cross-reference here immediately turns that despair toward a massive, foundational Old Testament hope.
Yes, the source connects this image directly to the Valley of Dry Bones in Ezekiel 37, verse 11, where God describes the state of Israel in exile. It says, "And he said unto me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Behold, they say, our bones are dried and our hope is lost. We are cut off for our parts."
Our hope is lost.
The profound theological implication is critical here. Just as God could breathe life, strength, and national identity back into those hopeless, dry, scattered bones of Israel, he can restore and reassemble our modern situations, no matter how completely broken and scattered they feel. The visual metaphor of defeat becomes a spiritual possibility for resurrection, even if it feels physically impossible.
But the immediate resurrection of David's faith happens right in the next verse, verse 8. He doesn't wait for God to restore the bones. He restores his internal focus. And it all hinges on one small but crucial word.
One tiny word.
Let's hear that incredible pivot. But mine eyes are unto thee, O God the Lord. In thee is my trust. Leave not my soul destitute. That's Psalm 141, verse 8.
That tiny conjunction is one of the most powerful words in all of Scripture. He just finished painting a picture of total, inescapable hopelessness, scattered bones, imminent death, And then he pivots with a conscious, volitional act of faith. He makes an intentional declaration of trust. That's the very essence of enduring trials.
He is deliberately turning his gaze away from his circumstances, the scattered bones and the powerful enemies, and fixing his eyes entirely upon God. This isn't passive hope, is it? It's an intellectual and spiritual discipline.
It is the pinnacle of defiant faith. Faith is not the absence of circumstances screaming defeat. It is the intentional choice to trust despite those circumstances. David chooses where his attention rests. And the teaching material emphasizes this intentionality by sharing a historical parallel, King Jehoshaphat's prayer in 2 Chronicles 20, when he faced an overwhelming military coalition. His famous declaration in 2 Chronicles 20, verse 12 was, "Neither know we what to do, but our eyes are upon thee."
Wow.
The ability to articulate, I don't know the human solution, but I know where my focus belongs, that is the key to enduring the storm. And following this declaration, David makes his request, "Leave not my soul destitute," meaning don't abandon me, don't leave my life empty and defenseless to the enemy's devices.
The source material from the You Need Faith in Jesus team places really strong emphasis on this verse for practical application. For the listener who feels overwhelmed and genuinely unsure of the next step, what is the action item beyond just a mental affirmation?
Well, when you have done all the human planning and the situation still looks like scattered bones, the most spiritual and powerful action is the intentional declaration, maybe even accompanied by a physical commitment. My eyes are on you, Lord. I trust in you. The application is to intentionally disrupt the cycle of anxiety. If the scattered bones are represented by doom scrolling or hours spent watching worry-filled news, then the intentional but might involve physically closing the computer, turning off the screen, and spending 5 minutes fixing your eyes upward in prayer.
It's the practical discipline of attention management.
That's it. Choosing to rest your gaze on the reliable rather than the terrifying.
Having settled his heart internally with that massive declaration of trust, David returns to the external threat in the final 2 verses, but now with a focused confidence rooted in his trust in God. He specifies the nature of the threat in verse 9.
He does.
He prays, "Keep me from the snares which they have laid for me and the gins of the workers of iniquity." That's Psalm 141, verse 9.
I find the specificity here incredibly powerful. David is not asking for protection from open, honest warfare. He's focused entirely on the traps and the trickery. A snare and a gin are highly specific terms used by hunters, both referring to deceptive, often hidden, devices designed to catch animals unexpectedly for complete destruction.
This tells us something about the nature of his enemies. They are not fighting fair. They are using cunning and deceit, aiming for a surprise takedown.
Precisely. Their intent is not to defeat him in an open fight, but to deceive him into compromising or stepping into a trap that brings about his ruin. And the spiritual parallel here is immediate and direct. The source material reminds us that we face an ancient spiritual enemy, the devil, who is referred to in Scripture as the ultimate master deceiver.
We see that specifically in Ephesians chapter 6.
Correct. Ephesians 6, verse 11, instructs us on the need for comprehensive defense. Put on the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. The wiles are the traps, the cunning schemes, the precisely designed nets. David's prayer in Psalm 141, verse 9, provides a template for us to ask God for protection from the spiritual equivalent of snares and gins, the clever plots that appear harmless but are designed for our complete spiritual destruction.
So how does that translate into a modern prayer life? What are the unseen schemes we should be praying against today?
Our prayer has to request that God protect us not only from the obvious visible traps, the temptations we can name, but more importantly, from the unseen schemes. This might involve protection from subtle relational traps designed to isolate us, financial traps dressed up as easy opportunities, or even intellectual traps presented as compelling but ultimately destructive ideologies. We have to trust in God's power to expose and deliver us from the cleverly hidden plots of human and demonic enemies that are designed to cause our complete downfall.
So it's a prayer for divine intelligence and preemptive intervention. Finally, we reach the conclusion of the psalm, verse 10, which is David's powerful declaration of confidence in divine justice and his certain hope for personal escape.
A powerful conclusion.
He concludes, "Let the wicked fall into their own nets, whilst that I withal escape." Psalm 141, verse 10.
It's not just a desire for personal vengeance. It's a request for the establishment of a righteous, cosmic order. David is asking for perfect justice, that the wicked would be caught in the very traps they designed for him. It's a desire to see evil be self-defeating and self-consuming.
That principle of divine reversal, the boomerang effect, is so satisfying, and it's frequent in the Old Testament narrative.
It is the cornerstone of God's intervention against the wicked. The source material cites Psalm 35, verse 8, asking for the same outcome. And let his net that he hath hid catch himself. Into that very destruction let him fall.
It's the same idea.
It's the confident belief that God is an active agent who ensures that wicked intent and wicked mechanisms boomerang back onto the sender. We see this principle throughout Scripture, from Pharaoh being drowned in the very sea he used to pursue Israel, to Haman being hanged on the gallows he built for Mordecai.
And David's final phrase, whilst that I withal escape. What does that withal convey?
It conveys absolute certainty. It's David's ultimate expression of confident hope that while this divine justice is being served, he will pass by safely and completely. He's not hoping for a narrow escape. He is confident in a secure and comprehensive deliverance.
And for our final application, what is the core teaching from the You Need Faith in Jesus team regarding this promise of justice and escape?
The foundational teaching is that believers can and should maintain an absolute trust in God's ultimate justice. Even while we are called to pray for our enemies and show them kindness and mercy in the present, we can hold on to the absolute confidence that our final and complete escape is secured in Him. This hope extends beyond immediate temporal circumstances and looks forward to the blessed assurance of ultimate justice when Christ returns. David teaches us to live today with the confidence of that final secure escape.
This has been an incredibly deep and rewarding analysis of David's Psalm 141, guided by the foundational teaching provided by the You Need Faith in Jesus team. We have covered a huge amount of ground, from raw panic to profound spiritual discipline. Let's briefly synthesize the three major strategic lessons we have extracted from this text.
First, we established the transformative power of urgent, honest prayer. We saw it as a precious and acceptable offering to God, like the holy incense and the evening sacrifice described in verses 1 and 2.
Second, we examined the absolutely critical need for a divine sentry over both the mouth and the heart. We came to understand that our internal weaknesses, our careless words, and our corruptible desires, those dainties, are often the most significant threats we face, as detailed in verses 3 and 4.
And third, we witnessed the strength born of radical humility, the maturity to accept correction as healing oil in verse 5, and the defiant, intentional trust in God, epitomized by that powerful pivot in verse 8, but mine eyes are unto thee.
That pivot, that intentional choice of focus, is the defining moment of the psalm. It reminds us that spiritual strength isn't found in eliminating the chaos, but in choosing the correct focal point amidst the chaos. And that brings us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over this week as you reflect on David's plea.
Since David's moment of profound strength came not from solving his problems, but from intentionally declaring, but mine eyes are unto thee, consider this. What small practical step can you take today to physically or mentally interrupt your pattern of anxiety? What physical action can you use to turn your attention away from overwhelming, scattered bone circumstances and intentionally declare your trust in God? Is it physically silencing a digital source of worry? Is it walking away from a toxic conversation? What is the tangible commitment behind your personal, intentional but statement going to be today?
A profound challenge to carry forward into your week. We appreciate you joining us for this thorough verse-by-verse analysis of the Scripture, which was all expertly guided by the teaching materials provided by the You Need Faith in Jesus team. Go forth well-informed in spiritual discipline, and we hope you join us next time for another deep dive.